Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and happy Pride, everybody. I'm going to be making a few videos that are going to be talking about the LGBTQIA plus community and my relation to it. I have been procrastinating making this video due to the fact that I don't know where I am on this spectrum of, and if I am even part of that community, what my connection to the community is. It's a complex question. And if you're an overthinker like me, somebody who sees all the nuances and things, then it could easily be a tricky question to know, like, what is my place in this whole discussion. But let's just say that I've identified as being on the LGBTQIA plus community since being 18, basically. So this video will be specifically about my gender, but I will be making one about sexuality, which will be more difficult for me, I think. The gender part is less, I find it less important in my sense of identity, and I find it less of a sore spot for me. I will just say that I identify as a woman, and I do not conform to the societal expectation of being a woman, but that is what I would say is the closest to what I am. So what inspired me to make this video is 3 different videos, actually. One of them was Morgan Foley, who made a video about how her hyper-feminine mask, she would mask this with her autism and try to blend in by presenting as feminine. So that was an interesting video. Another video was by Pawn's Journey, who came out as not cis, being non-binary, and using the pronouns she, they. So I guess, you could use the pronouns she or they for them. And their whole journey with all of that. And I think I relate to quite a few things from Pawn's video. But there are certain things that I don't relate to, because we all have our different experience, right? LGBTQIA plus has tons of different experiences, even for people within the same label. And like autism, there are also spectrums. So it gets to pretty complicated discussions. And the third video is Trash Discourse, who made a video about gender, and like a video essay about gender. And I think that they would say that their pronouns are they, them. I'm not sure. Like on YouTube, I would just call them Trash, because that's the name that they use. Yeah, and they talk very well about different models, different theories across history and different groups of how to conceptualize gender. Like gender is a form of labor, gender is a form as, how lesbians often see themselves as not being a woman, really, because being a woman is so tied into the concept of being desirable and appealing to men. So what are you if you are not that, And it's complicated, because like, what is gender really? There are many different ways of seeing it. Like, is it the way that you present yourself? Is it the way that you feel? Is it the way that other people perceive you? It's, it's a social construct. Is it real? Is it real because it's a social construct, or is it unreal because of that? There's a lot to unpack. Also, there's the fact that autism affects this everything, because it affects socialization, it affects your social ties with people, it affects your relationships, it affects your personality, and your personality, your gender affects your personality affects your gender presentation. There's a lot. Everything is tied, I would say. And so, so for me, I grew up, never really placed a super high importance on being a girl or being a woman. However, I did know to distrust boys and men, because I would be bullied by everyone, girls and boys, but I would be bullied in a way that I did not understand by boys. Girls, for some reason, I could understand better where they were coming from, even though their stuff was a lot more intricate and stuff. I learned that certain social pattern of being. So I figured that I could blend in better with girls than with boys, even though I couldn't blend in with the girls either. So I identified as a girl, and I would definitely say that I don't identify, and I've never identified as a boy or a man, not as a masculine person at all. However, do I fully subscribe to the concept of womanhood and femininity? Not really. I think that my personality as an INFP, or self-professed INFP, I don't know, I fit the stereotypes of womanhood and like the label of womanhood a bit better, because as a person I'm more shy, sensitive, more interested in arts, not interested in cars and sports, and more interested in like reading, and I'm a little bit more of a passive, submissive person in general. I'm not very assertive and dominant, so I fit certain of the gender stereotypes, gender roles that are assigned to my gender. However, I also suck at many skills that are supposed to be women skills, like multitasking, and I'm autistic. Also, I suck at, like, my executive dysfunction sucks bad, so I never learned how to cook. I don't have those skills. I've never learned how to clean a house, and so I don't know these things, and so these are things I expected from me as a woman, but I think that also I grew up where my parents did not like force gender stereotypes, gender roles onto me as a little girl. So they didn't force me to do all of the girl things that you were supposed to do. Like, my mom never told me that now it's time to learn to put makeup on, or learn to shave, or learn to she didn't teach me a lot of skills that would have been good, but at least she didn't like force skills that were very gendered for the appeal of men, to reinforce beauty standards. My mom would put me in dresses, but I wasn't against dresses, and it was fine. My mom didn't force me into things that were like sensory bad for me. She I wanted to start ballet and play the violin, and my mom encouraged these things. My grandma actually wanted me to try martial arts, but I wasn't interested in that, so my mom did not put me in it. But my mom would have been open to anything. My dad was not really part of like, deciding things in my life. He was kind of absent. There is a lot of gender roles that my parents followed. My mom would take care of the chores in the house, and my dad would not. He would work, overwork, and we would barely see him. But yeah, my dad is not a very hands-on and not a very macho character. However, he isn't very emotionally available. He's very nerdy and he's into finances, and he takes care of the car and that kind of thing. So he is still pretty much a man. It's just he's not very practical person compared to some other dads. My mom was not very stereotypical female in her appearance. However, she did do all of the motherly chores that were supposed to be done. I don't think that my dad has ever changed my brother's diaper, like ever. At the same time, I think that I've never seen my mom wear a dress. So yeah, I've never seen my mom wear a dress. I only realized that like yesterday when I was thinking about this video. I was like, wait, I've never seen my mom in a dress. I've only seen her in her wedding dress in a picture from a long time ago. But yeah, also I know that my mom doesn't shave. So I thought that it was completely normal not to shave until when I was around 15, a girl in like one of my friends said, oh, I forgot to shave this week. I haven't had the energy, so haha, I'm so gross. And I was like, wait, you mean that you usually shave? And she was like, yeah, like everybody shaves. And like everybody else was like nodding, like, yeah, they shave. I'm not sure how much they were hiding, how much they were doing or not, and I was like, wait, so I'm the only person here that's not shaving, and I'm the only person who thinks that this is strange. And yeah, a lot of me as an autistic person was just like being oblivious to tons of things. So I was oblivious to that. I didn't understand that. I didn't understand makeup. I didn't feel the need to do it. I didn't understand. I never dressed fashionably. Looking back on old photos, I dressed pretty horrendously and was really, ugly in my fashion sense. I didn't really care about expressing myself in that way through my appearance. It wasn't really a thing for me. I'm just like in my mind, I'm just like a walking body, but I'm not like anything specific. And also, I think I'm going to talk about it more in my asexuality video, but I think being asexual also makes me blind to like people's attraction to me and other people's attraction. I don't really see appearance as something that pulls me together with other people or like has any real meaning to me. I know that that's different for a lot of people. Find that expressing themselves through their appearance is a huge interest or something that really excites them about life. It's not such a big thing for me. For me, it's mostly that I want to feel comfortable in the clothes that I'm wearing, and whatever I'm showing is secondary. However, with time, I've started to see that, oh, well, actually the way that people treat me is different depending on what I wear. And, if I wear makeup or if I wear something nice and fancy, then people are going to treat me nicer than if I don't. And that's unfortunate for me because I don't have those skills and I don't find it interesting or exciting. So I get... the whole thing is just confusing to me. So therefore, I don't do all of the things that take care of your appearance that most women do. So that alienates me further from womanhood and femininity, because I'm not interested in those kinds of things. So there's that. Then there's also the whole thing about womanhood being so necessarily associated to motherhood, which I personally am not attached. Like, I don't think that I will ever be a mother, because sensory-wise I don't want to. Also, like, you know, I have a hard time enough taking care of myself due to my autism. It's just, I can't see myself putting myself through such a huge responsibility, such a huge load that a child, you know, a whole human being would be. So I don't think I will ever have a child, much less birth a child, because all of that health and sensory weirdness that comes with that. But so yeah, so I don't really associate myself with womanhood in that way, the way that is considered so close to motherhood. The only thing that so much of the symbolism around being a woman is connected to being a mother, you know, like the whole thing about Mother Earth, the whole thing about being connected to nature and to water and the creatures of the planet, nature, children, you know, being a caretaker for the elderly, you know, being a community organizer kind of role is just not something that I relate to. And I think that, you know, being an introvert makes these caring kind of positions difficult. And also being autistic makes that role, those responsibilities difficult. So I need to make a whole new idea of what a woman is for myself. So why do I still consider myself a woman after all of that is alienating me from the label of woman? Well, it's because I don't really relate to any of the other labels really either. Like, I don't relate to being non-binary because I relate more to women than non-binary. I've made a video about this before, actually. And then also, I don't, you know, there are other genders and other kinds of labels like demigirl, and, you know, I've been through some stuff, let me say, in terms of looking at labels. Pon talked about having a special interest in like gender identities and stuff. I had a special interest in like the LGBTQIA+ community back in 2015. I was looking up like all the it was the Mogai. Mogai. If you know the word Mogai, then you've been chronically online for too long. Like, if you know that, yeah. It was the whole time where we were inventing all these micro labels for all sorts of, and having all sorts of different flags for all sorts of different, you know, micro ways that you could view your identity. So, but at that time I identified as woman, and that's it. Now with time I've also become close to a lot of men. However, most of the men that I'm friends with are gay. So, like, or bi, you know, they aren't strictly heterosexual, let's just say. And so, you know, their version of masculinity is different than a straight man's version of masculinity. And of being a man, it means different things to these different men. Now, so I see that I am woman in a different way than most women would count themselves as women. But once again, does any woman really relate to the I was going to say the diagnosis of women, the label of women? And yeah, there are people who like truly don't question these labels and are like, you know, truly are like, okay, I'm comfortable with this label. However, I think that a lot of women like struggle with the beauty standards that they have to fulfill. You know, it leads to a lot of anxiety and stress, which I don't relate to as much because like I don't care so much about any of that. You know, like the women who go through plastic surgery. That's, you know, I'm not saying men also have their beauty standards to follow. You know, like going to the gym, dressing semi nicely, you know, and not dressing in a feminine way. And there are all sorts of like silly rules about these things. But so overall, I would say, okay, so I'm a woman, but I don't think that I'm a very feminine woman, you know, at least appearance wise. And also, I don't relate to a lot of the symbols of womanhood. A lot of the, you know, quintessential woman girl experiences, like going to a slumber party with all the girls, I don't relate to that because, you know, I was autistic and I just like did not experience that in that way. If I went to a slumber party, like, you know, I would have been bullied about it afterwards. It's not like I bonded with all of these girls and had all these secret codes and like handshakes and gossiped about boys. Like I wasn't in that group ever. But to the point of saying that I don't relate to the label at all, I don't know, I'm just so used to it. I do think that there is a part of me, you know, so I would say my pronouns are she, her, right? Because I absolutely do not relate to a man. And if somebody misgenders me as a man, I do get kind of offended, let's just say. Like there are certain old ladies that, or old men that, you know, are partially blind and they don't really see, you know, me from far away. I can look slightly androgynous because I'm long and lanky, like a boy, I guess. You know, especially if I have my hair back and everything. At the old age home, a lot of the old people thought that I was a boy. And I didn't appreciate that. So I'm guessing like, okay, so that firmly puts me into women, right? But you know, it's not just the spectrum from boy to girl. There's the middle, right? But there are people who identify completely agender, like completely off that, and people who identify with completely different genders. You know, maybe I'm a radish raven gender. I don't know what a radish raven gender is, but you know, I wouldn't be against being called they them. You know, I think that would be kind of nice. But I'm not against she her either. I don't experience dysphoria about it at all. But I wouldn't consider myself a he him. So sometimes I don't consider myself a woman when I'm just like walking around. I'm a person, and yeah, sometimes I'm not Ingrid anymore. I'm Radish Raven. Sometimes I have no name. I'm just there, you know. I'm just a being, you know, and some beings have names, some don't. You know, sometimes I'm not really even an animal. Sometimes I'm a plant. Like I'm not. I don't have that much attachment to being a woman. But if I have to attach myself to a label that has to do with gender, that's the label that I would choose. And so if that means that I can walk around the world and be considered a woman and yet be outside of the realm of a woman, then I think that might inspire certain girls or women to see that the narrow label that they've created in women, in being a woman, might do well to expand its definition. I could think of myself like, a different gender than women. But for me, it's not a very useful thing for me to do. I'm not saying that it's different for every person. I think that certain people, it's like they do non-binary very well and they are agender very well. I just find that I'm not going to be being non-binary better than I'd be a woman, I'd be outside that identity as well. And I'd be outside agender even, because I still consider myself as having a gender. These are very abstract concepts. I could also say that I'm fluid, because certain days I think that I'm firmly a woman and some days I feel like I'm nothing at all. That is no gender at all. But yeah, I don't find it to be a very useful label for myself. So that's where I'm going to end this video. I hope that you enjoyed going through all these tangents of different very, very vague concepts out there. I just want to say to everybody that you're valid regardless of whatever gender you may have or not have. I think that everybody is wonderful in all their experiences. There's so much nuance and complexity in every human being, and it's wonderful to see and to witness and to experience being a person myself, and to see how some people derive so much joy and excitement from their gender. So many people there is some sense of meaning within this, and how some people just don't derive any meaning from it at all. And it's such a wild diversity of people out there. So happy Pride to all people of any gender, and even those who don't identify as having a gender. Also happy Pride to whoever is watching this who's an ally. That means a lot, that somebody is willing to go through an almost half-hour video to learn about people who don't necessarily have the same experience as you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.